Today, I'm super excited to be here. And today I'm going to talk about how developing a personal mission can provide direction and guidance in your career. I'm going to talk about mine and what it's done for me. And I'm also going to talk about how you can go about developing one of your own. But before that, a little bit of context about me. So right now, I'm a product designer at Etsy in Brooklyn, New York, as Ryan said. And a product designer is responsible for designing the end-to-end experience of using digital products. So on the day-to-day, I use research, consider business goals, and use everything from visual design to front-end code to build products for our customers at Etsy. Etsy is a marketplace where millions of people around the world can connect online and offline to make, sell, and buy unique goods. On Etsy, you can get everything from mugs to sweaters to totally legit magic love potions. Can't say that I tried it. And also, even this two-headed taxidermy duck, which people are into. At Etsy, I work on mobile tools and systems that help Etsy sellers grow their businesses. Before Etsy, I was a product designer at Vine, at Twitter, helping build the happiest, most creative corner of the internet. Gone too soon, but never forgotten. Before Vine, I was a designer at Jukely, a music startup in Brooklyn, and my first real design job out of college. I went to school at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. And while I was there, I had no idea what I was doing. I must have changed my major 5 or 6 times. I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do after graduation, and whether or not I was setting myself up for success, and even really what success looked like for me. I spent a lot of time wondering, am I making the right choices? Maybe you're in a similar place, and maybe you can relate. Or maybe you're at your first or second job and looking for something new, but wondering what your next step should be. Something that helped me navigate crossroads like these at different points in my career was developing a personal mission. Having a personal mission provided me with direction, made it easier to make good decisions, and attracted people and opportunities that I never thought I'd have. A personal mission is a really powerful tool, and today I'm going to talk about what it can do. But first, I'll define what it is. So what is a personal mission? A personal mission establishes what's important and reflects why you do what you do. For example, my personal mission is to build things that help underserved communities connect, learn, and create on their own terms. This mission has evolved over time, and as I've learned, especially as I've learned more and more about myself and what I care about. It has stuck with me, though, as a powerful compass throughout my career. Crafting a personal mission like this involves a few things. The first is internalizing your core values and beliefs. Internalizing your core values helps you make decisions in lines with your principles and beliefs. Thinking about them, ranking them, and even writing them down can ensure that when you have to make really big decisions, you aren't distracted or swayed by circumstance or social pressure. This may seem obvious, but it's important that you don't assume that you know your values. Let's try a quick exercise. If you would say that autonomy is a core value of yours, if you would say that you really value creative independence, creative freedom, and just the ability to be self-governing in your work, raise your hand. Cool, a good group. If you would say that stability is a core value of yours, that you really value security, safety, and balance in your work or personal life, raise your hand. Okay. Maybe the same. Well, something that you should know is that sometimes the things that you value can be in conflict, which can make making decisions more difficult. So, for example, imagine you were having to pick between 2 internships or 2 jobs. One with a big, old, established company, and another with a scrappy, new startup. Let's say you actually deep down really do value autonomy. You learn that the structure of your potential of the company, of this larger company and your potential role doesn't really leave a lot of room for the creative sort of freedom that you really value deep down. But your parents think it's a really good idea because maybe working at a big company is safe and makes mom feel like you're doing okay. and your friends think you should totally do it. Defining your core values ensures that when needing to make a decision like this, you aren't swayed again by social pressure or the circumstances that surround the decision. Another reason why it's so important to define your core values and beliefs is that knowing and making decisions with your core values in mind helps you signal to other people who you are, which can open the door to opportunity. So near the end of my time at Jukely, I was making really fun, cool things, but I felt like I was put in a position at the company where I felt like I was compromising on some of my values. One night at a designer meetup in Brooklyn, I met a designer who was sort of in a similar place. We talked about our experiences, and I just kind of touched on like loosely what my mission was and kind of like the things that were sort of important to me and that I value, and how I felt like I was unable to act on them at my job. That person turned out to be someone who had a big role at Vine and got a job in a few months, basically. And they reached out to me to ask if I wanted to come meet the team one day. She mentioned that I left a lasting impression on her and immediately thought of me when they started to consider hiring new people. Having a personal mission can help you meet and connect with like-minded people. When I came into interview at Vine, I told a lot of the same story, and I was really upfront about the fact that I was interested in working on the product because of three major things that I value. I really value fairness, creativity, and community, among other things. And this came through in how I talked about the problems that I was principally focused on solving. Back when Vine was around, a lot of the content that was viral and influential on the platform was created by young Black people. But they were not necessarily the ones that were receiving the recognition and really getting the profit. And often their culture and ideas were being stolen from them. In my interviews, I stressed my values and my desire to work on attribution on the platform. I later learned that this passion and sort of clearly stating what was important to me and knowing that was something that was a big reason behind my hiring. Something to be aware of, though, is that your personal mission doesn't have to be perfect. Not every single thing you value needs to be reflected in this statement. You might find that certain things you value, actually just identifying them, can help you achieve your mission. For example, I really value visibility and collaboration. My visibility online and offline is important to me, not just because I'm a huge narcissist, which I'm not, but because when I was a student, I didn't see many designers that looked like me. It was discouraging because it was really hard to find role models that I felt had my background. My visibility online shows young Black and brown children or kids or just people that there's space for them here in tech. Collaboration is equally important to me. I'm not the type of person that likes to hole away in a conference room and just figure out problems all by myself. Some people really value self-sufficiency, and that's totally cool. But I'm more of the type of person that likes to bring people into my design process right from the beginning, right when we're trying to solve these problems. I work better this way, and I make sure that all the people that I work with and all the teams that I work with know this about me. So visibility and collaboration aren't so obviously seen in my mission, but you can probably see how knowing these things about myself and making decisions with this in mind have shaped my actions and maybe helped me move closer to reaching my mission. Once you define what you value, you start to have the tools you need to build discernment and eventually direction. So when I was in college, there was definitely a period of time where I felt directionless. There were many things I could imagine myself doing. Envisioning who you want to become, or maybe even who you want to look up to, is something we've all probably done before, but fixating on that alone can definitely cause problems. At different points in my college career, I envisioned myself as a writer or a poet, or even maybe a reporter at a major news organization. At one point, even a photographer, and maybe around junior year, a filmmaker. So by my junior year of college, I had 6 or 7 different future versions of myself, 6 or 7 different future paths that I could take, and no real direction to know which way to go. And even when I ended up focusing on tech and design, I was confronted by an industry that is overwhelming with titles, just overflowing with titles, and I barely know what half of them are. But these titles also have rapidly shifting responsibilities and sort of skill sets that have lots of overlap. And it was really hard to know if any of these future positions or any of these future titles were really right for me. Developing a personal mission can solve some of these problems because in addition to forcing you to think about your values and beliefs, it involves defining and focusing on the impact that you want to have and making that your North Star instead of some concocted image of yourself. So to make that a little bit more concrete, when I was first doing my first bit of design work, I was in this place where I was lacking direction and purpose, and I was really captivated by Dribbble. If you don't know, Dribbble is a site where designers post some of their work. At the time, there was a lot of illustration and branding on Dribbble, which weren't really my interests or my strengths. And I looked up to people on the site that were producing this work that really weren't very good role models for me. But they seemed like the type of designer I had to be successful. Focusing less on who I wanted to become and more on what I wanted my work to be about ended up being a better heuristic for making decisions in the short term. And also, it helped me understand and connect to my work in a more meaningful way. It also helped me figure out what I should learn and maybe where I should apply. And it also helped me apply my values when I was maybe working at a company where maybe it wasn't the best or the perfect match for me. The last and maybe most important part of developing a personal mission is defining who you want to have an impact on. Earlier, I mentioned that underserved communities were the people that I wanted to serve. Thinking deeply about the communities you want to serve and acknowledging the ones that you may be ignoring is really important to ensure that you're thoughtful and intentional. Again, maybe that sounds really, really obvious, but something to be aware of and something that we all probably sort of know is that there are many products and systems that we use every day that impact millions upon millions of people in the world. And right now, some of those systems are either putting people in harm's way or having effects that weren't accounted for. Clearly defining who you want to impact and thinking deeply about those communities, again, helps you build better products. It reduces the probability that you cause harm. It also makes you, frankly, better at your job and even stand out. Your personal mission, again, isn't just about you. It's also about the people that you want to affect. It's important to know that no software is apolitical. This means that anything that you draw, design, build, ship, decide not to ship, prioritize, decide not to prioritize, makes an argument about how you think the world should be. That's a political act, whether you're aware of it or not. You wouldn't vote without knowing what the effects of your actions would be, so you shouldn't build software without really scrutinizing what the effects would be. Maybe you're sold on the idea that internalizing your values and beliefs, focusing on the impact that you want to have, and defining who you want to impact is important. Maybe you're on board that it's a good idea. But how do you get started? Well, the first thing you could do is ask yourself, what do I value? And also, what do I value the most? You can easily find a list of values online, but you could also probably talk to people that you're close to and figure out which values do you exemplify in real life. Then you could ask yourself, what communities are you a part of? Which aren't you? Which ones do you care about? And which ones do you not think about that often? Doing so ensures that, again, you're thoughtful and intentional. Lastly, you should be asking yourself, what is your unique perspective? My background, my race, where I was raised, and the things that I've experienced in life have basically formulated a lot of my values, and my values were the seeds of my personal mission. Consider the special things about your piece of the world that influence how you see the rest of it. Asking yourself these questions will help you build your North Star so that at every step in your career, when you find yourself at a crossroads or when you're in a position where you have to make a really big decision, you can go from being lost and maybe really confused to knowing why you do what you do and where to go to do it. Thanks, y'all.
I want to talk about or hear what you have to say about sort of the difference between your mission and goal setting, and if there is one, because I think mission developing and creating sort of that like larger plan for your career and your life like can be really daunting. Mm-hmm. And so how do you break that into goals and make it more like concrete, I guess, in smaller ways?
Sure, yeah. I think I would first say that goals and mission are definitely very related. But I think goals are different in that they're smaller and kind of directly measurable. Mm-hmm. They're also usually, I think, attainable a little bit faster. And ultimately, your mission is something that I believe you kind of live every day or like sort of try and live every day. And goals are, again, these like bite-sized things that you like complete and sort of move on. I think that goals sort of fit in mission. So I said earlier that my mission, again, was to build things that I felt helped underserved communities connect and sort of learn and create things on their own terms. And so a lot of my goals, I would say, that sort of bubble up to that were in meetings at Vine or at different places that I worked, sort of fighting for not just the user, which I think is the responsibility of designers like as a whole, but also for users that we maybe weren't considering. Mm-hmm. And so making sure, sort of setting up goals for myself where, when I was in a meeting where maybe there were really big sort of important people there, sort of making sure that it was a goal of mine to bring up these things that were important. I think that was sort of a concrete goal that sort of fits into.
Do you have like certain points in the year or just like your own sort of rubric for measuring those things?
Yeah.
Keeping yourself accountable?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think, so all the places that I've worked, and I think a lot of companies in general definitely have like quarterly goals kind of that they make you fill out. Right. And I think that some of those goals are usually a little more concrete, like I want to do more public speaking, which is totally one of my goals this year, so I'm killing it. So I think around those times when I'm thinking about the goals that kind of roll up to the company that I'm working at, I also take some time in my free time to really think about like, well, every day am I, making decisions that are sort of in line with this mission, and are the things that I'm doing every day sort of marching towards that.
Okay, cool. On the idea of accountability as well, and you talked about like writing them down and making sure that like you're holding yourself accountable for that. Do you have practices or I guess talk about like actually putting it out there, like you're telling us now, but is there a system in which you tell your employers so that they're sort of aligned with like where you want to go and your peers as well with that mission to be like, hey guys, this is what I want to do, so like make sure that I do it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier in the example that I'd given, I think I'm pretty open about like my feelings and like the things that I value with the people that are close to me, and frankly also the people that aren't close to me. Like I'm pretty like open with like, hey, this is important to me. I mean, not people on the train, but like people that like maybe I work with that
so
like
you want milk with that?
Right? Yeah. Like not people that I work with that maybe aren't my best friends. I'm very clear about the things that are important to me, and I think that a core piece of that accountability is telling people and sort of like being open with like, hey, this is what I value really before you start to collaborate or work on anything. And I think from my experience, usually even just telling people, what you're going to do beforehand is like a great way to hold yourself accountable, because whether or not they come after you, you're going to be like, wow, I should really keep my word. And I think that that's a good way to sort of build accountability.
It's like 8-ball corner pocket.
Yeah.
You got to follow through. Okay, so this is the big question. What happens when your mission really brushes against the mission that you're in the place where you're working?
Totally. Yeah, this is like a tough one that I've thought about a lot.
Maybe I'll ask like the follow up to that right away so we can just kind of open it, because we talked about this before. Choice is really a privilege, right? And being able to be like, this is where I want to go, but yet I'm in this environment where I have to be sort of like making a living, or maybe it doesn't align like, at all times. Like, how do you deal with that? How can people deal with that? And I think that's a really good conversation to kind of open up.
Yeah, totally. I would definitely echo that. Being able to work somewhere that is aligned with your values is certainly a privilege. I do think that even if you work in a place where maybe the company or that the team where you're on isn't, totally in line with your values, I think that that's okay in that, like, say like I said, I don't want to like name names, but let's say like like I said, I value ensuring that people receive attribution and sort of credit, and maybe the thing that I'm working on, maybe that is not something that people are really prioritizing. I think ultimately, if you're a designer, and I don't know how many designers there are in the room, I'm assuming most of you. Ultimately, when you're a designer, you're hired to give your opinion and also, again, advocate for the user. So I think that even if you're in an organization where your values maybe brush up against the organization, I still think that you can, in small decisions and in sort of small battles, fight for the things that you think are really important. And again, like if you are considering who you're building for and really thinking about the communities you want to serve, ultimately that orientation of the things that are important to you will usually make it so that the thing that you're fighting for is usually maybe like a really good thing that everyone should be thinking about, right? Because it's all about really being intentional and thinking about like who you're building for.
And you brushed upon is like the choice of which communities are going to
Sure.
ignore or sort of avoid. Have you, like, how was that experience? Have you come up against any like negative experiences with that, or like, I don't know, talk a bit more about like how you come to decide that.
Sure, yeah. Again, I don't want to like put people on blast. But yeah, I mean, when I was around the time that I was interviewing at like Vine and like a few other companies, I was approached by some companies that maybe I would say like are in the, what's that called? Like sharing, not sharing economy, but like basically apps where like you hit a button and someone does something for you. No shade to those products and those apps, but I found that when I thought about what working there would be like and the degree to which it sort of like lined up with the things that I valued, I thought that working on these, first world conveniences just felt like I wasn't really building for the people that needed it, and it felt like if I were to work on those things, that I would be building for really privileged, lucky people like myself who live in Brooklyn and order Seamless and have their laundry done for them. And so, yeah, I think that that was, I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, totally.
I think that
Just like provocation.
Sure. Yeah, I think that that's an example of, I think that community, this community of like, very privileged people who are able to, call someone to like hang a picture frame in their apartment or something. I think that that's a community that I'm like perfectly willing to ignore, and I think that that's a community that'll be all right if they can't put a picture up in their apartment.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think totally. I think that just goes back to sort of that. What are your goals built on top of your mission? If you want to sort of just make a paycheck or something, and you can sacrifice some of that and make it okay for yourself, then that's
which is okay. Also, I definitely want to say that. Like I don't want to suggest that working on an app like that or a product like that like isn't important. I think that there are definitely ways that you could imagine that there's some nugget of like altruism within something like that. Like maybe it's providing jobs for people, and like maybe that's something that's like super important to you, and that's sort of like how you connect to it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that that's like sort of inherently.
And mission and passion doesn't always have to be sort of nonprofit. So
Exactly.
Like I'm doing something that's for profit, but it's not a super lucrative industry. It's kind of just making sure that how you want to spend your day and your time is represented by what you believe in. Right,
totally, yeah. I mean, we live in like a capitalistic society, so y'all should definitely get your money because like you won't be able to buy things. But yeah, I know, I definitely think that that's true.
You mentioned being aware of privilege and working in this society where that's kind of the dichotomy of our era, right? We know that we're privileged, we know that we have these affordances available to us, and yet we still try to serve those underserved communities, those marginalized communities. And you mentioned brushing up against like doing projects that might not necessarily hold true to your values. Do you think that there's another way that we can empower other people who are privileged to understand that privilege and help raise those platforms? Because I think as designers, we're really socially aware of that dichotomy of that, like we're these really privileged people, and so we can see that there's this need or this necessity. But do you think that there's a way as designers we can help others see that need or that necessity to really raise up those voices, those marginalized communities, give platform for those voices?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really great question. A tough one too. But I think that, one thing you can do is if you're a person that sort of enjoys, privilege because of like who you are and sort of like your identity, then I think that like elevating the voices of people who again, are marginalized or maybe like underrepresented. And also, in the design world, there are like products and companies that we kind of like put up on a pedestal and say like, oh, this is where I want to work and like this is the coolest thing, and they just like launch this thing and it's really, really cool. And I think like maybe even drawing attention to the products again that are not these, these sort of startups that I'm talking about, and maybe the ones that have maybe a more like civic engagement like side to them, or maybe like a more like community oriented side. I think that might be one way that like in your role as a designer in this industry that you'd be able to sort of draw attention to the problems that really do need to be solved for these people, and also the products that are sort of taking aim at those problems.
I think like across the board, we're so accustomed to sort of honoring and celebrating across industries, right? Like the people on the biggest stage and creating like the biggest like name for themselves in the spotlight. But I think things are changing in how we're rewarding and honoring impact, and being able to find new ways to measure that as well, which I think is really important, because a lot of like smaller initiatives and smaller things, like mentoring someone, can have a huge impact and needs to also be like acknowledged.
That's a huge thing too. If you are slightly further along in your career and you have the opportunity to like you have time to offer someone advice or like mentorship, maybe prioritizing, mentoring people who would maybe have a hard time finding someone to mentor them is maybe another thing that you can do, particularly if, again, you're in a place of privilege and maybe further along in your career.
I think we're out of time for questions, even though I want to ask more. Thank you guys so much. And
yeah,
thank you,
thanks.